Welcome to the Fit Dad Nation podcast, forging strong fathers and raising a stronger generation. It's time to get up, man up, or shut up with your host, Steve Roy.
Hey guys, this is Steve Roy. I want to welcome you to the Fit Dad Nation podcast. I'm very excited to be speaking with my guest today. But before I introduce him, I want to invite all you dads who are listening right now, and those of you who are ready to start taking action on becoming a better father and a better man, I invite you to join our brotherhood. And the best way to do that right now is to head over to Facebook and apply to our private group, which is the Fit Dad Base Camp. So that can be found at facebook.com/groups/Fit Dad Base Camp. Now, my guest today is someone that I've been following online for a while, and I love his work. His name is Brad Pilon. He's gained a lot of notoriety in the fitness and diet space, and specifically for his stance in research on fasting and intermittent fasting. He's an author of a very fascinating book that I've read a couple of times on the subject called Eat, Stop, Eat. And he is the man to talk to if you want to know more about intermittent fasting. And I can tell you from reading his stuff that he has definitely done his homework when it comes to this stuff. Brad, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. How you doing?
I am hanging in there, man. I'm excited to talk to you. I really am.
Well, good. I'm glad.
Yeah, so I've dabbled in fasting, intermittent fasting, if you call it, a little bit, but I've really never committed to it, and I've had kind of subpar results. And so the more I hear about it, the more I learn about it, the more interested I am about really learning the science behind it. And so, I'm a fan of like the Primal Blueprint, Mark Sisson, and he kind of goes into it a little bit, but you take it to a whole new level here. You kind of go deep into the subject with your book. And, I just love to hear your story of how you got started with all of this.
Oh, it's pretty easy story because I think it resonates with a lot of guys. I got into bodybuilding at a really young age, and I think I blame Lou Ferrigno and the Incredible Hulk TV series. Remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when it was David Banner, not Bruce Banner. I mean, that was my first sort of like, wow, like that guy can literally transform his body. And then this was pre-CGI, so I'd go to my dad and be like, is that like a person? My dad's like, yeah, it's Lou Ferrigno. I'm like, oh, I want to look like that. Right? And to give you some background, like I didn't play any sports as a kid because my dad's like, you're too small. You're not playing. You're gonna get hurt. Right? So that's why I was so like in love with that idea of that transformation. But the cool thing about that transformation too was that, it's not like David Banner, it was a fluke. It was some sort of gamma ray thing that turned him into that monster. And that what kind of drove me into the idea of like nutrition and training, right? Kind of making your body change. So, at a very young age, I want to say like 12, 13, I got a subscription to the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. Like I had no idea what a lot of the words were, but that shows the level of like I wanted to be in on this type of knowledge. So by 14, 15, I was working my local supplement shop. By 17, I'd already decided when I go to college, university, I'm going to study nutrition, which is what I did. And then out of college nutrition, I went and I worked in the supplement industry doing R&D for 6 years. And that was like an amazing, expansive part of my life because if you remember back to the early 2000s, supplements equaled like money. Mm-hmm. The margins on these things were beautiful. Companies that were selling supplements were just making money. And I really lucked out because the company I worked for actually really wanted to do clinical research and they had the money to do it. So they're like, Brad, like let's put you in charge of research. I mean, they had guys doing it before, but you're going to do it now and let's see what you can do. So I was able to fly around the world, like to all sorts of cool spots and talk with PhDs and people doing this research about what was cutting edge, what was going on. And that fascinated me even more, really got me into it to the point where, I had a child on the way. I was just getting to the point where I was making enough money where you weren't living kind of month to month trying to pay the mortgage and everything. And I thought, nah, screw this. I'm going back to school. I'm going to do graduate work and really dig in on the science side of things. And I found a school that would take me. And I signed up and I got ready. And my goal was, of course, to design like the perfect diet, right? Like the perfect bodybuilding diet. And to start, what's a better place to start than to figure out what happens when you don't eat, right? Because coming from the bodybuilding world, I knew that when you didn't eat, like it was basically Armageddon, right? Like muscle just fell off your body, you got fat, and you died. right? Like that's every 3 hours. That was pretty much what happened. And so I started with looking at the research behind what happens when you don't eat. What I started realizing was that what I thought would happen, like the very first thing was that massive metabolic slowdown we all know happens. It's just fact, right? But the studies didn't seem to show that. So I would take all the studies that showed that fasting didn't cause your metabolism to slow down. I chuck them in the garbage because, well, it's my bias, right? And I'm like, there must be something wrong with those. And it got to the point where I'm looking at that garbage pile, and it's really like Paul, like there's a significant amount of studies sitting there. And I thought to myself, okay, either a lot of research is done really, really poorly, or myself, who's just starting on his journey into graduate work, might not know everything there is to know about nutrition. So I talked with my advisor, I flipped gears, and I decided to study the metabolic effects of fasting. And I shortened the window, because fasting can go on forever, to basically what happens to the human body in 12 to 72 hours of fasting. And that was basically the skeleton for Eat, Stop, Eat.
Well, it seems to be working. I mean, you're in your 40s. I mean, you stay lean. And it's just so funny because everything that you teach in that book flies in the face of everything that we have heard for the last 15 years about how to eat, when you're exercising. We'll get into that, but
yeah,
it's so interesting because it's like a shock. I mean, someone reading it for the first time will say, how's this even possible? I've learned this for so long. It just can't be right.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're living proof that it works. And, like you say, there's no money in not eating. So it's not promoted like it should be, right? Because the food companies.
If you think about it. Yeah. There's who in their right mind would want to promote fasting? All the way down to when you're doing the food guide, and that our governments are also, yes, they want the best for their citizens, but they also want the best for their industries. So eat less, like it's eat responsibly, eat the right foods, eat the right food mixes. But you're never going to have, a food guide in Canada, or United States, or anywhere be like, oh yeah, and don't eat on Sundays. Never going to happen, right? So there's, other than me and a handful of people, not many people are profiting off of the idea of fasting, right? So it's just not there.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you take this personally like I do, but, when I'm reading about this and you come to realize that, all of this, the whole nutrition industry is controlled by these donations from supplement companies and food companies that want to basically find some form of health claim or some benefit that they can use to sell their products. You realize that they really, as much as they say it, they don't really care about our health and wellness, right? They want to make money. That's it. Like Coke is selling bottled water and Gatorade sells, quote unquote protein or energy bars. This is just garbage products that are just used to make money, and they're not helping us.
I would argue, and it hurts to say it, but a large portion of the money funneled into research in the area of nutrition would be considered marketing spend. Right, you're trying to get the claims you need to sell your products. You're trying to prove your products are safe, or you're trying to prove your product is better than the other person's product. There is research in the area of nutrition that goes on for purely altruistic, trying to help people, but there is a much larger amount of money in we're going to create some research, spend $1 million in research to hopefully make hundreds of millions with this product, and that's just the reality of it. Right, it is a vehicle for great marketing claims that helps sell products.
Yeah, that's just it. So, what can we believe, right? Standard American diet or the food pyramids. You have to look at these things now with a grain of salt and wonder, is it really actually good for us? Or is it just a way that these huge companies can just add to their bottom line? It just pisses me off. It really does. You probably have become numb to it because, you've been researching it and seeing it, year after year.
Yeah.
But I have a really tough time with that.
It is hard. Well, it makes it hard because then it's right back to the average person's dilemma of how do I know who to believe and what to believe, right? So if everybody has a vested interest, and they may not even know that what they're quoting came from someone with a vested interest, it just becomes, well, like you say, infuriating to put it lightly.
Yes, and it kind of leads into what you talk about, which is called authoritative parroting. Yeah. Which I thought really, I never really thought about it like that, but it's true. And I'll let you explain it. I was going to explain it, but you probably do a better job of what that means.
I think authoritative parroting is really the prequel when I wrote about that in 2007 to like clickbait articles, right? It's just whatever headline you can get from research because that was done by someone who's perceived as an expert, right? But that expert was just quoting the work from another expert who's quoting the work from another expert. And it's this big giant, they must be right because they're authority sort of circle going on, right? And so everybody is passing the buck of actual responsibility onto the higher power authority, right? So obviously, if X person wrote it and X person's a doctor, they must be right. But the doctor's thinking, well, obviously that group doing that epidemiological study did their research right, it must be right. And the people who did that study are like, well, our statistician is really smart, he must be. And it's just a constant passing the buck instead of actually digging down and being like, is this right? Well, if all these people, all these authorities say it's right through a chain of rightness command, it must be right. And that's sort of that idea of parroting, right? Is it, well, this person said it, so it must be right, but that person's only saying it because someone they consider as an authority said it. So it just goes around and around that way.
Yeah, and it becomes truth, right? Then
Yep.
Coaches start teaching it, and it's everywhere online, and people start selling it, and then everyone believes it, and it does. It becomes a truth for people, and it's very hard to dispel that.
Exactly. You can't undo it once it's a truth. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
Right? Once it's common knowledge in nutrition sphere of influence, it's really hard to undo it. And even when you have a study that comes out and then the same authorities jump on it with the giant, clickbait titles of, this previous study proven wrong, it's such a blip. You can't just undo what we think. And that's how we've gotten to the point today where, equal amounts of people will argue with, just everything they have over low carb versus high carb versus calories versus not calories versus fat versus not fat. I mean, because there's been so much ingrained into the common thought that you actually have now in the common thought of nutrition two completely opposed ideas. Saturated fat is good for you, saturated fat is bad for you. In the same, within the same group. And you sit there thinking, how can we not just get together as just a conference on fat and be like, all right, what is it, good or bad, right? And that's why everybody's so infuriated. And the problem is we've never stopped to consider, which I think we need to do with a lot of nutrition, that the answer may be, in this context, it doesn't matter. In this context, it might, but in this one, which is the one you fit into, either way, it doesn't matter. And that doesn't matter answer is the one that I think we really start to have to embrace if we're actually going to simplify diet and nutrition and actually get results. Because we can't possibly stress and angst over everything with nutrition. Otherwise, we'll go insane.
Oh, we are, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's so overcomplicated. It's ridiculous. I mean,
yeah.
So, I mean, like you said, I mean, me personally, I'm not convinced that intermittent fasting or fasting is the be all end all for our weight loss problems, but everywhere you look, there's a new diet, there's a new program, there's a new way or approach to eating that is the quote unquote best way.
Yep.
But I mean, we're never going to get everybody on the same page. I mean, I guess the best we can do is just educate the best we can, like you with, you have a very strong belief that this is the best way to lose weight or fat permanently, right?
You're providing multiple options, I think is the way I like to think of it. And you're helping people who didn't fit in previous options find an option that works for them.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, you probably would agree. I mean, no one approach to anything, whether it's a fitness program, a nutrition program, is going to work across the board. Nope. Some people just, some people do really well. I do really well with a paleo type diet. That works for my body, my lifestyle, and I feel great on it. But, the guy next to me would be horrible. He loves carbs. He can't stop eating carbs. It's never going to work for him.
Right. And so the breakdown there is the accepting that what works in theory and in science, et cetera, may not work in application. And then just by the fact that we are still having significant problems with obesity is proof of that concept, right? Is that the proof itself, the theory, the science, the blackboard equations simply sometimes don't dissolve properly into a workable approach that's applicable to everybody. And it's the application that really matters, right? And so it's making sure that there are applications that fit in different people's lifestyles and allow people to understand there may be multiple solutions to obesity, like multiple applications. And that's okay, right? And so it's letting people sort of realize that they can play with different ways of doing things and get different results, and that's perfectly all right. And it doesn't mean that any sort of background theory is now unsound. It's simply that the application didn't work for you.
That's exactly right. So it's so interesting to for so many years, and I've been coaching and training for 20 years now, and for many of those years, I was preaching the six small meals that keeps your metabolism boosted, and now, that's definitely shifted away from that and saying that it doesn't really matter how many meals you eat, as long as you're in a calorie deficit. And now I'm even seeing a really big trend, especially like on Instagram with a lot of these big name type of guys with hundreds of thousands of followers, is that it doesn't even matter what you eat, as long as you're under your calorie requirements, you'll lose weight, which, obviously makes sense. Obviously you will lose weight. We're not looking to lose weight. We want to lose fat, but it's to a point now where you see there are no bad foods. And, I'm like, so you're telling me I could just eat a whole diet of Pop-Tarts and Eggo waffles as long as I'm under my calorie, needs? Yes, of course I'm going to lose weight, but I don't want to lose weight. I want to lose body fat. I don't want to lose my lean muscle. But people they're losing sight of that now. And oh shit, I can just eat donuts and whatever, but I'm only eating 1,600 calories a day, so I'm gonna be fine. It just doesn't work like that, and it's very frustrating to see that misinformation. It's not quite clear, and people are jumping on that bandwagon, and unfortunately, it's getting a lot of traction.
The problem is that you mentioned Instagram, which is a perfect vehicle for this, is that a lot of those experts are speaking truthfully from their own experiences. And the problem with that is that a number of them are on some form of anabolic steroid, anabolic hormones, to be just some sort of anabolic, right? Whether it's even just testosterone replacement therapy, or it's full-on trenbolone. They're on something. And so their experience is, holy crap, I can eat whatever I want as long as I'm in a deficit. I'm not losing muscle mass, ergo I'm losing fat. But guys like you and I are sitting there going like, oh, you're not losing muscle mass because I don't think you can if you wanted to right now, right? So for the rest of us, we have to be a bit more strategic about it. There is a massive difference between a man who is on any sort of anabolic and a man who is not. Under those same lines, there is a big difference between you and I and some 25-year-old Instagram star, right? Just the same as the big difference between me now and me when I was 25, just me, let alone this other kid who could be genetically gifted. So you have to take these things into account. I can remember in university, like my undergrad years, so like 19, 20, 21, 22, you'd go to a bar, you'd get really, really intoxicated. You'd come home, and at 2 a.m. you'd order a pizza, you'd eat a pizza, you might go to bed. The next morning you'd wake up and you'd feel, oh my God, that hurts a bit. I might not go to my 8:30 class, but you're up and moving by 10. Yep. And you're fine. If I were to do that now, I would be in bed for until July, right?
Exactly.
It's just you don't recover the same, right? Yep. So we have to admit it's different. And I like, people like to talk about, your 40s like it's the new 20s. And I get that because we're starting to realize that, we don't have to kind of decay into middle age in our 40s. But let's remember we're talking about an entire decade. And I really see the 40s as that sort of age where the difference between 40 and 50 is a lot like the difference between being 10 years old and 20. Like, it's a big difference, right? So we can't eat and live the same way as, a 25-year-old Instagram star, especially if they're on steroids, right? And so I don't think a lot of them are lying purposely to create a great story. I think they're just telling you their experience, right? And the experience you have as a 23, 24-year-old may or may not being on some sort of anabolic and getting away with eating whatever they want is, if I can remember back, it's not too far off my experience not being on drugs, but just being young. So, but for the rest of us, you will absolutely, to your point, lose weight in a deficit pretty much no matter what you're eating. But that's not really the goal.
Right. To
your point. The other thing that people get confused on is that losing weight and health are not the same thing. They're not just synonyms for each other. I have a hard time describing what health is, but I can say with absolute certainty that health is just not weight loss, because obviously weight loss can happen at the detriment of health, as we see in wasting diseases, right? So our goal is to be healthy and to slowly lose excess body fat to the point where we're happy with our bodies, right? Because I don't think that necessarily being 6% body fat is healthy either, or necessary, or even good for you, or whatever. So it's just eating in a way that allows you to slowly lose weight until you're happy with the body you have. And that's going to always take not just diet, but it's going to take weight training. And that's what this is sort of all about for me, is finding a way to make that, right back to what we were talking about earlier, applicable to most people.
I totally get what you're saying. And, the only thing that I would add is with these Instagram kids, in my opinion, they're really dumbing things down to appeal to a large mass, mostly women who want it laid out for them and want, okay, I can do this. And then, at the end here, click my link and buy my 1999 book.
Yeah.
That's the issue that I have, is I despise people that are marketing fitness in a way that isn't necessarily doing what's right for the person. It's ultimately to make a dollar. And I mean, I'm on Instagram constantly, so I see it a lot.
Yeah.
And then nothing I can do about it. These guys got to make their money somehow. And I just don't agree with it at all. So, I mean, I'll just leave it at that. But
yeah, I think the hard part on that is if you are a trainer, right? And so your experience and your education revolves just around getting a client from A to B, A being overweight, B being lean. And you implement different things to make that happen. And then you're just, again, right back to parroting authority. You're assuming you know why that worked. And that's where we get into trouble, to your point, is because they're just sort of spilling out the simplicity or maybe some very oversimplified reasons. Instead of just saying, like, this is the program I use that works, they need a theory and a reason. And that's where we get into this sort of, to your point, I guess it's a lack of substance behind the bravado.
Correct. So, we haven't even gotten into fasting yet, but there's so many things that I want to talk to you about. There's a couple more that are really important, I think. And one of the things that I read in your book is you said every single diet program is destined to fail long-term, regardless of your willpower, because we'll eventually succumb to powerful marketing, advertising, and the lure of great tasting food. I think that's really powerful when you really think about that.
For me, I mean, I know people love the science and the minutiae of hormones when it comes on to fasting, but to me, this is the biggest point, especially the way Eat Stop Eat was designed. So with my experience with traditional dieting is you decide one day, you're like, crap, I do not like my body. I am now going to eat 1,500 calories a day, every day, forever, until I have the body I want, which is just basically saying I'm going to commit to a slow, inevitable march to failure, because no one can do that, right?
Right.
Then what'll happen is, your niece's wedding or some sort of barbecue happens and you slip up and you fail right there. And you think, oh, I can't do this. Like, I suck. This is horrible. So instead of just admitting, I had a donut, it's not a big deal, you're going to eat all the donuts. Like, every donut there is yours now. And then you're going to come out of this stupor and think, oh, man, I really messed up this weekend. I ate way too much. Okay, I'm going to buckle down. I'm going to be even more strict now. And you do another 6 weeks of being super strict, but inevitably you're going to fail again. It's just the sort of the law of averages there. And it leads you down this path into this stricter and stricter and more regimented style of eating. So one day you're going to look at it and be like, nah, it's not worth it. None of this is worth it. And I'm just going to not bother. Right? And that's what my big fear with traditional dieting is you're surrounded by marketing messages. You're surrounded by food. You just want to eat, right? You just want to eat. And eventually you're going to break. So to kind of parlay this into fasting, that was the biggest benefit I saw in my first studies on intermittent fasting, the way Eat Stop Eat was set up. So if you're fasting once or twice a week for 24 hours, you're just not eating at all, then you've basically squeezed all the dieting into 3 to 5 day chunks of diet. But with the fast, all you have to do is make it for whatever predetermined amount of time you set your mind to accomplish, whether it's 20 hours, 22, 24. Once you've hit that number, you're done. And you did it, and you accomplished it. And it's positive reinforcement, because if you've done it once, you can probably do it again. And if you've done it twice, 3 times, 4 times, then you're on a roll. You're going to have horrible fasts sometimes, just like we have horrible days, right? But in general, it teaches you that you do have the amount of discipline and self-control necessary to make positive change without every day being so difficult. Because on the days where you're not fasting, I'm just wanting people to eat responsibly, right? So it doesn't mean hardcore calorie counting. I mean, you do, if you want to become exceptionally lean, you do need to count calories. But if you want to just look good, then the combination of fasting and not eating like a child the day after Halloween generally does really well. That's kind of the approach I took, was realizing, if you just try to quote unquote man up and eat super strict for the next 16 weeks, there are a group of us who will manage that. But there's a much, much larger group that's not going to be able to do it, right? So they needed an alternative. They needed a new way to apply the very basics of calorie restriction in a way that maybe better suited their lifestyle. And that's intermittent fasting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what I like about it is obviously the simplicity, especially since my audience and my community are middle-aged dads.
Yeah.
The easier it is, the simpler it is, the more likely they are to succeed. You start tracking calories or God forbid, weighing food, stuff like that, they're gone. So if we can make it simple, and like I said, I don't have personal experience with really giving this a full out effort, so I can't say from experience, but I'm certainly going to give it a try now that I've really understood your book. But the ease of it is something that's ideal for guys listening to the show. Is why not give it a try? Why not, you don't have to jump on the Atkins diet or anything in particular. Give this a try. Be smart. Don't eat like an asshole. You fast once in a while, like you suggest, and see how your body feels, how you react.
Yeah. So what I'm looking for is I use the word simple a lot, and I think that's probably just because it's more marketable than the word practical. And practicality is really what I was seeking with intermittent fasting. So the way I approach it is, if you and I were to start fasting today at 2 p.m, we would fast until tomorrow at 2 p.m. So effectively, we're still eating every day, right? Because there's a window of time where we're still eating. Sometimes it's morning, sometimes it's evening, but you're never going a full day without eating. So it's not a 24-hour fast as in I don't eat on Sundays, right? It's I start at 2 or at 7 at night and go to the same time the next day. And what that allows is it still allows a significant amount of flexibility to do with, like we talked about earlier, barbecues or weddings or business meetings or business luncheons, right? You're not that guy who has to go to a business luncheon, with a prospective client who loves the steakhouses, and you're ordering, the salad. You're just setting yourself up for an awkward situation that may cost you a client or a contract, right? As ridiculous as that is, how you eat matters. I mean, I learned that really the hard way going out for a birthday. Back when I first started writing Eat, Stop, Eat, it was just a full day of fasting. And I went out and I was with a group of people, must be about 8 of us, and they all ordered their meals and I ordered the Diet Coke. And it drove everybody at that table nuts. No one wants to eat when you're not eating, right? Because you're throwing it in their face that they're eating and you're not. And then but they want to lose weight too, so why? You ruin everything. So you really can't do that. Even I've noticed if you're trying to be lean, back in my days when I was competing, like in bodybuilding stuff, like amateur stuff, you go out with a bunch of guys and they're all ordering burgers and you're ordering a salad. Like, yes, you get to sort of hold that one up on them, but it affects that social dynamic. It really does, right? And it's cool. You can get away with it with just your buddies, but in a workplace setting, it may not work. So I like the idea of intermittent fasting and being able to schedule periods of not eating, which takes all the thought out of it, right? It's not scheduling times of eating specific foods and making sure you've prepared your food the night before and have it in Tupperware containers in your fridge at work. It's simply, I'm not eating, for a period of time where you can get away with it. And then on the rest of the time, you can eat much closer to a normal human being. It seems to work far better for most people who live actual real lives and just aren't, like you said earlier, online Instagram stars who this is all they do.
Yep, exactly. So, other than buying your book, which I do recommend, how does the average guy that's got, life stresses, commute, a job, kids, he's, barely getting by, like a lot of men are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What's an easy way or, the best way? Because I think, in my experience too, fasting becomes a psychological battle because you're so used to eating. Especially when you get triggered by, let's say, coffee in the morning, you have that caffeine, and then all of a sudden, boom, you need a bagel. Like your mind just has to have something. And I'm the same way. Like I have a very hard time fasting in the morning because I'm so used to eating. What's a real simple? Because I think a 24-hour fast right off the bat, I think would be extremely difficult for a lot of guys, myself included.
Yep.
What's a better option, or how do you get started with this?
I think to get started, the hardest part is you have to get over the mindset you're doing something wrong. And I think most guys were still going to think, but I'm going to lose muscle or I'm doing something bad. And if you're spending 24 hours thinking you're kind of doing something bad, it's not going to be a good 24 hours, right? So no matter what you're going to get started with, the key is to remember that your metabolism's not slowing down, you're not losing muscle. No, you're not going to get stupid, right? Like you're fine. You're going to be basically the exact same way you always are. So if you're if you're a grumpy dick and you fast, you're just gonna be a grumpy dick. But if you're a normally happy person, you're gonna be it's not any different, And so the key I find is just accepting that all you're doing is not eating for a little bit of time. It's not a big deal. We're not talking about a week here, right? And then it's pick a time. It doesn't have to be 24, and it's just embrace it and go for it, right? And what I want you to do is use that time as a learning experience, because right to your point, what you'll find is that very few of us have actually been truly hungry or starving, right? More than likely, what we've all felt is the feeling of wanting to eat and not being able to. And that's a horrible feeling, but it's not the same. I can remember I came home from university back to my hometown, and there's a fast food chain called Arby's. I don't know if it's everywhere in the States too, but they make really good fast food. And so I got home, I'm like, I'm going to go get an Arby's. I'm digging, it was a post-workout meal or whatever, but I just had my mindset on it. And for whatever stupid reason, the Arby's in my hometown closes at 5:30 p.m. And I'm used to university town, everything's open 24 hours. So I get there and I see the close sign. Now this is a strip mall. So there's in either direction, there's a dozen fast food things for me to get. And I'm so furious that I can't have the Arby's. I am starving for Arby's, right? And that's when I realized that I should get money from Arby's. No, but that it's more the wanting of food, the habit of when you eat, what you eat that comes into play. An example along those same lines, when I was doing my grad school and working on intermittent fasting, the road I have to take, the highway I have to take to get to my university is exactly 40 minutes of a drive. And every 10 minutes, there's a Tim Hortons, which is a Canadian coffee shop. Exactly 10 minutes. There would be days where I would be fasting. And I would sort of, when you're driving, you're not fully aware of life in general, right? I was like that. And all of a sudden I realized, I'm in a drive-thru. Why am I stopped at the drive-thru? I'm late for class, but why am I in this drive-thru? And it's because that's the drive-thru I typically stop at. And I'm used to going to school with a coffee and a bagel, right? That's just my thing. And so on the days where I was fasting, and this is once a week when I originally started, right? So, I would throw up that schedule and why am I'm just here because I'm here. I ate before I left the house. This is not more than 30 minutes later. And I'm eating because that's my habit. I've also found that you will eat with certain people. You just have those habits where you see someone, you're like, oh, dude, let's get wings. Mm-hmm. Right? And so you spend the first couple fasts looking for that. Is when are you eating not because you're hungry, but it's because what you do, right? When it's, you've got the kids in bed and boom, it's Netflix and it's red wine. And you're like, what? I really don't need, a 10 ounces of red wine at 9 at night here, right? This could probably be every once in a while, this could be water or a Perrier or something. I can still have wine most of the time, but maybe if I cut it out once or twice a week, that would make a dramatic difference. But I'm just used to having it. And that's one of the main things to get you through those first couple of fasts, no matter how long they are, is paying attention to why you want to eat. If you find yourself when you're fasting staring in the fridge, the first thing to do is figure out why you're there. Right? Is it just habit? Are you bored? Usually I'm bored or I'm thirsty. And I think I'm hungry even though I'm thirsty. Mm-hmm. And it's paying attention to that. And then the next most important thing is if you say you're going to fast for 20 hours and you hit 20 and you're like, I'm just going to keep going. That's a bad habit. Because when you say you're going to fast for 20 and you stop at 20, you stopped. You accomplished your goal and you ended it. If you decide I'm just going to fast once or twice a week for as long as I can get away with, every single time the fast is ending you, right? It's you finally cracked an 8. And that's a bad reinforcement to get into. I want you to always be in control of this and just being when it's done, you eat. Not when you possibly can't fathom fasting another minute, you break and eat. The very different mindsets. So those would be the first two things to try is pick a time that maybe works for you based on that schedule. Stay busy, massively important. Focus on when you decide you want to eat, why, what's going on, what's happening, how can you avoid that? Even when you're not fasting, knowing that will help you tremendously. And then when it's time to stop your fast, you stop your fast. You don't try to plug in those extra couple hours for that extra 1.5 grams of fat burning. You just accept you've done amazing, you stop it, you pat yourself on the back, and you go on.
Yeah, I mean, those are all good points. And it's funny, like you mentioned. I mean, we don't need to eat, right? We think we need to eat, and that trigger is so powerful, but we don't need to eat. And you mentioned in your book that our biggest issue is overconsumption, right? You have a stat in there that the food industry in the U.S. produces enough food to supply every person in this entire country with about 4,000 calories per day.
Yep.
And we're eating it, though. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, this, as you know, I mean, the stats are ridiculous. I mean, 2/3 of the country is overweight, whatever it is. It's nuts. But yeah, it's everywhere. You can't get away from food. I mean, it is at every turn, and then we're just stuffing our faces 24/7.
I would argue that's why the big push generally for weight loss is exercise and not diet. Because exercise means you can push that 4,000 up to maybe 5 and make more profit, right? So it really, you're just a disposal mechanism for the food that's being made, and you don't need most of it. So it really is a giant mindset shift, and you really do have to fight against the trends, because just about every trend is stuff you should eat, not just not eating, right? So it's switching things out and in and paying more money for a different type of butter and that kind of thing, when the answer would just be maybe no butter, right? So
exactly.
basically, outside of the staples of your diet, if losing weight is costing you more money in the grocery store, you should consider that maybe you're just part of a market.
Oh, we are. No doubt about it. One of the biggest myths that's still kicking around, and I mean, you can't really get away from it, is the whole starvation response, right? So Tom Venuto is somebody that, I read his Burn the Fat, Feed the Muscle. That was kind of my go-to Bible for years as far as nutrition. And that was his big thing, was starvation response.
Yeah.
And so now it's kind of getting vilified, and people are saying, "Oh, that's stupid. That doesn't make any sense. There's no such thing." And I mean, you're obviously on that train as well.
Yeah.
You don't believe in the starvation response given your research. But I'd like to hear your take on kind of what happened in that transition from everybody says if you go, 6-8 hours without eating, you start to slow your metabolism, and then you slowly start losing muscle mass, and that whole thing.
Yeah, well, Tom, actually, interesting. Tom is one of my biggest regrets in this entire industry, because when I came on the scene in, like, ESOP, it was like 2006, right? And he was a proponent of the starvation mode thing. And I went into attack mode, that typical, 29, 30-year-old know-it-all, just going after the king of the hill. Yeah. And I, really regret it, because Tom was just explaining to people what the common think was at the time, right? So like Tom created starvation mode. And, it's an approach I would never do again, which is that sort of ego-driven online self-promotion. It drives me nuts. But he explained things pretty clearly, but using data from like the Minnesota starvation experiment, right? Where at the time we were trying to recreate the conditions of a prisoner of war. So it wasn't just starvation. It was massive amount of work and digging trenches, and the food was malnourished turnip soup type of crap, right? So, and the guy started off incredibly skinny to begin with. And so there is a point where starvation mode actually does occur, and it's called starvation, right? So it's when you are starting to lose significant amount of muscle masses because there's no body fat left on you. That's a bad thing. I mean, we all can admit that wasting diseases that mimic that are bad, right? So once all the fat is gone and you're starting to use internal organs for fuel, you do not need a PhD to think, oh, that's probably not a cool thing, right? So it does exist, but it does not exist when you are a healthy person who is working out and is eating pretty much a maintenance meal, a maintenance style diet, and oh my gosh, you missed a 300 calorie meal that you have every 3 hours. And that was what I really took offense to, was, taken to its extreme, which was largely part of the supplement industry pitching meal replacements, etc. Was, if you didn't eat every 3 hours, that's when this occurred, right? Was the, this 3 hour window of now you're losing muscle and now you're actually gaining fat, even though you didn't eat anything. And it was this whole mythos of, basically being able to turn air into fat type of idea. That I took issue with, and the idea that once you got to a certain level of calorie deficit, you would start gaining fat, which again made zero sense. And a lot of that comes, again, all the way back to what we talked about with those Instagram people, with people talking about their personal experiences. If you go very, very low calorie without working out for an extended period of time, you will start to look looser, is a better word. You have a lot of edema. You're holding water. You are losing muscle mass at that point. So things just don't look healthy. And I think we can all agree that if you just didn't work out, laid in bed and ate, 400 calories of a liquid meal, eventually you would look unhealthy. And that's just translating to people saying, oh my gosh, I must be in starvation mode, which in that circumstance you might be. But in a circumstance where, you're weight training 3 or 4 times a week, you're living an active lifestyle, you're actually paying close attention to what you're eating, but every once in a while you take a break from that eating, this is not happening, right? If you're relatively fit and active guy at 25% body fat and you're trying to diet down like 15%, this is not happening, right? It's more the, I'm getting ready for a bodybuilding contest and 7% body fat just isn't good enough because I actually want to be like negative 2% body fat. That's when weird stuff starts happening, right? But to extrapolate that out to everybody else is nonsense. The mind-blowing things people come up with, like I'm getting ready for a bodybuilding show. I'm working out 6 days a week for 3 hours, 2 hours in the morning and an hour at night. My calories are really, really low, and I'm on just a whole host of drugs and supplements, and I'm really tired. So I must be in starvation mode. You'd be like, that's what it is, starvation mode. It's not everything else right. You're doing yourself right now, right? Like just, yeah, most people doing this stuff are also, they're not the trainer. They're the full-time person working a job as an accountant somewhere who's also trying to fulfill a bucket list goal of getting to a contest. So not only they have all that stress, but they're, they've got, it's tax season coming up and their boss is on them, but it's starvation mode. And you're sitting there going like, yeah, it is, but it's so much more than what you're trying to blame, right? You're just trying to blame your calorie intake when like everything with what you're doing is wrong. To take that out to the average guy who's just trying to get control of his life and maybe get his waist back under control, I think does that person a large disservice because it gets right back to what we were talking about, everything being so bloody confusing and not knowing what to do. The advice of someone trying to get from 6% to 4% body fat is very different, and the concerns are very different from the guy who's trying to get from 25 down to 10 to look good on the beach.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. So did you go to war publicly with Tom?
You know what? I did. And if I haven't apologized to him over email, which I think I have, I've done it. I'll do it again. It was me being childish. It really was. And it was an ego stroke of I know everything, right? And the assumption that the 1970 research paper that I read, and like I'm the only person in the world to ever find that paper, right? It's that kind of, and I'm going to defend myself a little bit by saying this industry is so cyclical. I see this going on all the time, right? Mm-hmm. So, it happened to me when people sort of did the whole fasting's not good for women thing. And I'm like, oh, here we go, right? Here's the young people trying to like make a name for themselves by taking on someone who's got a bit of notoriety in the industry. And it's always going to happen. I just hate the fact that I was part of that machine. Yeah, so Tom, if you're listening, sorry about it.
I actually am trying to get him on the show because I would love to talk to him, but I haven't heard back from him.
Yeah.
So we'll see. So, so a lot of the guys that listen to this show, right, middle-aged guys, most of them are carrying, some weight around their midsection. So for a guy that's, let's call him 40 years old, he's been carrying 30 pounds of fat around his stomach for 15 years. He's at 36% body fat. He's not healthy.
Yeah.
But wants to get ripped and lean. And you make this point, and I talk about it ad nauseum as well, but you can sure get down to 180 pounds, 8% body fat, but how realistic is it for you that you're going to stay there for more than a very short time? Because it's the amount of work that goes into keeping you there. It's just not realistic for most guys that are living a busy life with kids and all that other stuff. It's just too much work. At 22, yeah, do it all day long. At 42, probably not going to happen.
Yeah, you can skip class and go to the gym when you're in high school, and that's all right. You can't skip work to go to the gym. That generally doesn't turn out well. Yeah, a couple things there is, firstly, I've found 10 to 12%. You Google Brad Pilon and all those shirtless pictures, I'm like 10% there. I'm really not that super shredded, right? And 10 yeah, beautiful. It's mine too. Yeah, 10 to 12% for most guys is more than enough to be the lean dad, right? You don't have to be crazy shredded to look good. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people in this industry, as they mature, come to that same conclusion. right? The goal is not 0% body fat, nor should it ever be, right? And if the goal is 0% body fat, you got to really step back and figure out why you're doing what you're doing, right? Because it's not for health, it's not for your family, it's not, to just feel good about yourself. You got something else going on that you need to prove something to someone, right? It's not cool. So yeah, 10 to 12%. The main thing to learn next is like, okay, so I want to get down to 10 to 12%. That's what I heard, that's kind of a good level. But I am not 10 to 12%, which means whatever I've been doing up till now is not what I get to keep doing, right? So your current lifestyle is not the right lifestyle for you. And it comes down to some hard decisions about, wings nights or beers after hockey or whatever the case may be. There's something that you know. And so I like Craig Ballantyne's a buddy of mine. He's gone on to do a lot of business coaching now. Mm-hmm. But one of his pieces of advice is okay, if you were your friend, what advice would you give you? Like if you sit down and be like, all right, this is what's going on, right? And so I think if you were to be giving someone your identical twin some advice, you would know exactly what it is you need to cut out. You don't need to read 15 blog posts from a PhD nutrition to realize, you know what it is? Like I probably don't need the mixing bowl of cereal in the morning. That's probably holding me back, right? It's just the little things that you know what they are, right? So anybody who thinks they're getting away with something, you're never getting away with it, right? Actions always have consequences. The things you put in your mouth will always affect you. There's no free food. I got in that habit when just this immensely amazing donut shop opened up in the city close to where I live. And it was just so good. So I just kept going. And I'm like, I'm just going to work here. And then it's like, I'm getting away with having like 2 or 3 donuts a day because I've just, I've got things tracked. And then like, wasn't 6 weeks later, I looked in the mirror. I'm like, I'm not getting away with anything. That, it may take a couple weeks to show up, but I was not getting away with it at all because you don't get away with stuff, right? Sometimes you miscalculate and it feels like you're getting away, but you're not. So it's realize 10 to 12% is a more reasonable expectation. Then it's whatever you're doing now is probably needs to be tweaked. Next, it's like, okay, what can I actually tweak here? It's like, okay, it's summer and I really just enjoy a cold beer at night. I'm not willing to give that up. Fine. But then the fries at lunch have to go. Like you've just got to balance this out, right? Mm-hmm. Just if everything counts, and let's just say it counts equally, then you prioritize for yourself like an adult and just be like, you know what? I'm getting a Kit Kat every day when I drive home from work, and I don't care at all what Pilon says. Okay, fine, have that Kit Kat, make it up. Like if that's the one thing, it's like, okay, I need this. Totally cool. Find somewhere else to fix that, right? But you've got to be realistic. There isn't anywhere in this scenario where there's magic pixie dust food that doesn't count, right? Nowhere. So just make everything count and prioritize it. What can you live with? What can you live without? Do that. And then the final one is realistic expectations. So take a tape measure, wrap it around your belly at around belly button level, right? Don't suck it in, just stand normal. For every inch you want to lose is going to be about 5 pounds of body fat, right? So, if you're like, I just need to lose like 10 inches off my waist, that's 50 pounds. And a lot of guys get stuck on this, right? They're like, well, no, Brad, I'm 240, not quite the same shape I was in high school, but I think I'd be pretty shredded at 210. I'm like, no, you're going to be shredded at 170. You're 5'9", and you have worked out since high school. Like, no. And a lot of guys I get this question all the time. It's like, Brad, I don't want to lose a lot of weight. I just want to lose my belly. I'm like, your belly's a lot of weight. It's a bowling ball, right? Like there, it's got to go. And so you need to give yourself permission to be light. Realize that most Hollywood celebs and most athletes, they're lying about their weight. So just accept. Most Instagram models are lying about their weight. So just accept that. Next, accept the fact that if you're 5'10" and Chris Hemsworth is 6'5" or whatever he is, you're not going to weigh the same amount. It's ridiculous, right? So realize even if you're 5'9" and the guy you're looking up to is 5'11", there may be a 14-pound difference in lean mass because he's a bigger human being than you are. So just ignore everybody else's weight. You don't walk around with a t-shirt that says 174 pounds on it. Nobody cares, right? It's just, weight is just for online bragging rights about stupid stuff. So if you just care about how you look, you're probably going to end up lighter than you want to be, or you think you should be, or you were back when you played semi-pro football when you were 19 and now you're 46, right? Like, it's just accept that you got to give yourself permission to be light. It's going to take a bit longer than you probably think it's going to. Don't rush it. And then just accept you're going to have to change your life around. And it's got to be a change you can maintain for a significant amount of time. And then just buckle up and do it. And that's, it's sort of not, it's not a hard, tough love kind of thing as much as just me helping you be realistic about what it's going to take. I rambled a lot there. Yeah.
No, it's spot on. I mean, it's spot on. I just love hearing this coming from, someone that has the experience that you have. So one thing that, I think we both agree on and is one of the reasons why I really admire what you're doing is, we talk about, the solution, quote unquote, isn't going to be anything in particular. It's not a quick fix. It's not a particular diet. It's not a particular program. It's your day-to-day life, making small changes. And what you talk about is slowly, purposefully start changing your day-to-day life. And yeah, it's a hard thing to do because everyone wants a quick fix. Everyone wants to be able to pay for their solution, but it doesn't work like that. So making small changes every day to your lifestyle that slowly become habits permanently is the way to make those changes. And, it's not sexy. It doesn't sell, but in my opinion, it's really the only way to do it long-term is to just piece by piece, step by step.
You look at anybody who's made a significant change in their body. Any coach who's been online, like Tom is a great example, for years and years and years, making massive transformations in people. They will all agree that the magic, true magic in all this, is in the mundane consistency of day-to-day life. It's in the mundane. It's in the just consistent mundane stuff. That's where the magic is, right? So it's not going to be in the one thing you add in. It's just going to be day-to-day, almost mind-numbing consistency of just, okay, this is what it is, right? It's the same way, you don't get in your car every morning and be like, I'm going to find a new way to go to work today. You just go to work, right? I don't get up every day and read about the 14 different ways I can brush my teeth. I just brush my teeth, right? And it's the same thing with diet. It's the same thing with exercise, right? You can try a bunch of different exercise modalities, etc. But I promise you, you are not gaining muscle if you're injured and not in the gym, right? It's just being able to work out consistently that makes a difference. Same thing with diet. It's if you have a spot on fantastic, spreadsheeted diet that's full of miracles and magic that you do every Saturday, but you don't do it Sunday through Friday, nothing really going to happen, right? So it's a consistency. So it's, if you were to fast twice a week, just follow Eat Stop Eat to a T on the fasting. But on the other days, if you misunderstand it and be like, Brad says I can eat whatever I want, as much as I want on these days, you're not going to see any change. Zero. If you read it and be like, yeah, but I'm going to do the fasting part, but I'm not going to do the working out part, it's not going to be the same. It's the mundane consistency of that lifestyle of being, all right, I'm going to commit 3 to 4 times a week. This is probably for most of us who maybe work out less than an hour, like 45 minutes times 4 in a grand scheme of a week. It's not that big. I'm going to do it. And I'm just not going to eat like I'm a high school kid anymore. And I'm going to eat like a responsible adult, knowing that, I'm no longer growing vertically and any extra calories are making me grow horizontally, right? I'm just going to accept that and eat appropriately. Things will happen. But any attempt to change that is, it's like trying to sprint the beginning of a marathon. It just doesn't really work that well.
Well said. Well said. So I want to be mindful of your time here. I just wanted to just end on a note here. Something that I had read that it really struck me, and I'm actually going to be stealing this if you don't mind, because it's really powerful. And you said, with whom you eat will always be more important than what was eaten.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I just love that. I love that.
I found that there was another one I found recently that was like, don't spend 95% of your life chasing 5% less body fat. Right? Like, it's so, the people you eat with, food is typically celebration. Food is family. Food is friends. Right? So I treat it as such. It really is a way to get together with other people. Every time you get together with other people, it doesn't have to be, a feast, but just the people in your lives and what you do day to day is way more important than having 8-pack abs with veins running through them at 49 years old, right? And in fact, I would really argue that for a lot of guys, especially if you have kids, getting back to kind of a point I was trying to make earlier, is if that's your goal, if you're willing to sacrifice everything for an 8-pack with veins running through it, you better really clarify what everything is, because to me that starts to be family, it starts to be your kids, and it starts to be time you don't get back, right? So just mundane consistency, the little changes, things that can fit into your life while still allowing you to do stuff. That's how we're going to do this, right? And if getting lean this year means you're not ever going to go to any social event, and consider what that means, right? Skipping your niece's wedding because you want to get lean doesn't sound like maybe the right approach to me. It might, and that's just my opinion. It might be that might be what you want to do, but I would say you're going to start missing out on stuff. So yeah, with whom you eat will always be more important than what's eaten.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, I've actually really enjoyed this conversation, and I definitely appreciate your time. So, thank you so much for being with us.
It was fun. Thanks for having me.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us. And remember, if you want more information, check out the Fit Dad Basecamp group on Facebook. And don't forget to stop by fitdadnation.com. Until next time, keep kicking ass and taking the next step. You can do this, Dad.